Good afternoon, everybody here in the room, everybody joining us remotely. We're very excited today to have with us. Oh, I'm Chris Silva, the president of the Taunton Area Chamber. I know so many of you, but we have so many new people on the call today, so it's really exciting for us. We're really excited to have Lieutenant
Lieutenant
Nichols.
Detective Mark Brady.
Thank you. I'm going to camera in a moment. I just wanted to welcome you and say hello. I will turn it over to them and they'll give you an overview of the training that they offer, answer any questions kind of you have on the spot, any details around how to schedule trainings for your place of work. So I'll turn it over to them now. Okay. Moving the camera. Let me just looking, but you can start.
Ready? Yeah. Right. So again, I'm Lieutenant Eric Nichols. This is Detective Mark Brady from the Taunton Police Department. Eric and Mark are fine. We don't need to be too formal. So basically, over the years, we've done a lot of school safety training. We started actually in Taunton in school safety training back in 1998, prior to Columbine and prior to everybody demanding it. So we've been doing safety and security type stuff for a long time. Probably about 10 years ago now.
It's got to be more than that.
More than that,
2009, I think.
Yeah, well, 2009.
Into the training.
We saw the demand for doing the civilian response to active shooter training, and that's the program we offer. Was everybody has to have an acronym, so it's CREES, which is Civilian Response to Active Shooter Events. We saw the need back in around 2009 that businesses were now asking us, not only public business, private business, but also the public sector too. You know, City Hall and different office buildings within the city. So we sought out a program, and that program that we chose was CREES for many reasons that we'll talk about. And it comes from the Texas State Institute research, and it goes by what we call the avoid, deny, defend. So you've heard of run, hide, fight, avoid, deny, defend. They're all the same. Every program is the same. But this program that we offer is pretty simple. It's modified slightly for the school department, and then it's pretty much given to the businesses. In Taunton, our chief has extended we have a team of officers. Mark is our lead trainer. But we offer it out to everybody at no cost to the department, no cost to the thing in Taunton. Again, I know there's some people on the Zoom here that may be from out of Taunton. And if we were to have a training, say here in Taunton, or maybe at the chamber and other people attended, but that would probably be okay. But as far as us traveling to other cities, I'm not sure the chief would, maybe in certain instances, but
Most of the folks on the call.
yeah, within reason. Yeah. So we've done a lot of buildings in Taunton. We've done 1,800 employees at General Dynamics. We've done Princess House. We've done Gordon Foods. We've done pretty much. So a lot of the bigger companies are now requiring it by insurance to have some type of training. There are private companies out there that do it privately. I am involved in some of those companies. We don't do that in Taunton. We do it as a police department in Taunton. If you were to hire a private company to come in, you're probably looking at about $150 per employee. We offer that training. I think that what we offer is a little bit better than the private company coming in. And it's not that it's a different program. Really get that one-on-one interaction with the Taunton Police Department. What happens is when you dial 911, guess who's coming, right? We're coming. So it's really, I think it's a little bit better to put names to faces and be able to reach out to people. And things like that. We think that what makes our program a little bit better.
And like one of the other leads, Bill Heenall, who's the patrol supervisor on the day shift, which is when most of the people are going to be employed that would be seeing him. So he can kind of give that firsthand how the day shift. You call 911 at 10 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. You kind of have that firsthand kind of experience we can pass on.
And it doesn't hurt. He's also our SWAT commander, so it's the guy you want to come and then that's what thing like our program, like you said, is in addition to that, at the end of our program, we always like to open it up to anything you've ever wanted to ask, in safe space. And we get some pretty crazy responses, and then in addition to that, we always emails and stuff, because you're always going to have one employee or two employees that just don't want to ask that question in front of everybody, right? So they wouldn't get that with a private company. They would be able to reach out to us. We could call them back or talk to them via email, and we could answer some questions. And again, like you said, it's never at any cost. So the biggest problem with active shooter training is everyone's nervous with active shooter training, right? So they don't really know what it is. I wish they rebranded stuff and talked more about situational awareness. So that's what we kind of go at it as an angle of situational awareness. We want everybody in this room, we're doing a training right now. By the end of it, we'll talk about time frames of training and schedule. But at the end of our training, we want you to see the world as marketplace.
Well, I'm not quite as jaded.
Yeah. Maybe almost, but for example, we always have somebody in the room in our training that's either married to a police officer, or firefighter, or something like that. And we say that person, when you go to a restaurant, you absolutely know unequivocally where that person's gonna sit, and they go, yeah, absolutely. And that's just an example of situational awareness, the way they see the world. We talked about in the training, for example, where's the last place you went out to dinner?
Blackington.
And how many the exits do they have there? So exactly, and I'm not putting you on the spot, but we do go down the active shooter road and about how to keep yourself safe in an active shooter event. But it's everything else leading up to that, that's part of this training. How do you see the world? Did you go in, because we went in that restaurant, we went out, and part of our program is the station nightclub fire. You know, obviously permission to use that. But that was one of the problems of the station nightclub, right? So that's part of the program. We talk about that. We talk about how you can not have that happen to you again. So there's many things, and even goes into fire safety a little bit. We talk about, you know, does everybody have a fire extinguisher in their kitchen and in their garage? And I go guarantee everyone's going, no, I don't. But that's where this fire starts. And the one in the kitchen is it in the cupboard right next to the stove, buried underneath all the pots where the fire starts, right? So, and everybody's shaking their head, but this is what we talk about in that training. So the training is an initial 3-hour commitment. That's about what we talk about. We like to keep it 25 and 50 people at the most, but
Yeah, we've done bigger, and the
Yeah.
problem isn't so much the training part of it, it's the Q&A afterwards. Which then, because if you've got 100 people, and even if a quarter of them have a question, that's 25 questions. So if you're 20, well, a quarter of them have a question, now it's only 6 questions. So at times, that's probably the biggest complaint we get about the program is, why is it so long? Can't you make it 2 hours? How about an hour and a half? And we certainly can. We could make it 10 minutes. You're just not going to get enough out of it. And we've talked over the years, how can we cut this down? And we sat and tried to figure out, and the shortest we got, it was 2.5 hours. So did it make sense to take out what we took out to save a half an hour? And the consensus of the team was that it really didn't. It detracted from the program. So that's always our biggest complaint is we have to buy in for a 3-hour block. But I think once you've been through it, and I'm not sure who's on the Zoom, we've done it with a bunch of different facilities throughout the city. I think once you've been through it, that you'll realize that taking anything out of it would really detract too much from it.
so the other thing we'll talk about the need for it, right? So some of the bigger companies are being required by insurance companies to have it, and that may be your case. You may want to check with your insurance company. And the other thing is some companies are actually even including like a security audit, which we do as well. And basically we just do a walk through your company and give you suggestions. And we find things like we went to one company. I don't remember this, he's already laughing because he knows what he said. We went to one company and they brought us into a room similar to this, and it was HR, and they said, this is the firing room. And we said, okay, so we talk about like how you set up that firing room. But in the corner at the entrance to the firing room was a glass case with all the stuff they sold was cutlery. So in the fire, a glass case with lots of big knives. So, you know, we thought that was good. So the little things that maybe you don't see that we see. So we can do that as well.
Even that room, just the chair placement, they had 2 doors on one on either side of the room, but they had the chairs on the other sides. So that now if something goes wrong, you've got to run around, you chase each other around to get to an exit versus having a chair at each door. And if I'm the person who's the HR director or whoever's conducting the meeting, there's a door directly behind me that I'm probably not going to leave last in case I need to get out. I can push through the door and move. You know, little things like that. And they're like, yeah, we never thought of that. And then, like I said, the whole cutlery issue was significantly problematic. And all the employees knew that that's what happened in that room as well. So it generally, if you were called to that room, it wasn't a big surprise as to what was happening. So,
You know, it was a big company, you know, hundreds and hundreds of employees, but, you know, and when we do the walkthroughs, we'll see things. Like everybody has a panic button sometimes, yeah, but is the panic button battery operated? And if it is, I guarantee if you push that, it's not gonna work. Because nobody changed that battery. So there's things that we see that you don't see. And have you talk to your alarm company and set up everybody's saying, if I push that button, it goes right to the police alarm. I'm like, no, it does not. It goes to a third party alarm company. So have you had the conversation with that alarm company on what the priority is? So if it is a panic, they don't call your employee first, they call the janitor, they call, so there's a lot of things to it.
Right, we tested one at one of the facilities, we called our 911 dispatch center, told them, hey, this is probably gonna come in. But so it's probably not gonna come in, because you never really know, and as soon as it comes in, call us on the radio. And these people, the employers were like, nope, this goes right to the police station, it'll ring within seconds. Well, we started the clock, and it took 2 minutes and 48 seconds for the 911 call to ring into the police station, into the 911 call center. So what we try to explain to people is, they're the first responders, because they've got 2 minutes and 48 seconds before we even get notified, and then plus travel time for us to get there. So that's one of the other things we talk about in the program is know what you have for safety equipment, and kind of know how it works to better prepare, better plan for that emergency.
And when it comes to an ultimate event, an active shooter type event, we're only asking you to keep yourself safe for 10 minutes. About 5 to 10 minutes, because you get that delay of coming into 911. How do you call 911? Do you rely on that panic button? Do you dial 911? Can you text 911? All that. And then how do you keep yourself safe? By our system is avoid, deny, defend. How do you keep yourself safe until we get here? And then we talk about what our response is too, which is, I think, very helpful. People always want to know, like, all right, well, the police going to wait outside like they did in Uvalde, or are they going to come right in like they did recently in Tennessee? And we train to come right in, but people can ask questions about that. And we do a very, very strong amount of active shooter training as opposed to a lot of places in the area. And the good news is too, when it comes to active shooter training for us, we're the hub of training for all the local departments all around. So even if you get Rainham coming, it's all similarity in training and that type of thing. So we talk about the need for active shooter training. The need comes down to, I think it's no concern, and not to scare anybody, but active shooter events are continuing to incline, right? We all know that, we see it on the news. But the good news is active shooter fatalities and injuries are on the decline. And why is that? It's because of training like this, and not just here, but all over the country. That departments are pushing this active shooter training and how you keep yourself safe. Because Mark hit the nail right on the head a minute ago. In an active shooter event, we are not the first responders. The people at the event are first responders. That's what you do that matters. We are now emergency responders, and we talk about all that. And there's many things. And there's things we talk about in that training. We were at the downtown there, the homes for troops.
Oh, yeah.
And the smallest, quietest staff member in the back of the room was sitting there, and we started talking about the defend part, the avoid, the deny, and the defend. And she's all of a sudden really sparked up. She's like, you mean I can like defend myself with a pair of scissors? And we were like, yes, you can. So it's just awareness. And again, we just don't want it to be labeled as only we're talking about active shooter. We're going to talk about medical emergencies. We're going to talk about how you keep yourself safe in all kinds of other emergencies at home, here, at work, at the workplace, different ways to do that. Which is more likely, obviously, than an active shooter event, right?
Yeah, the way the program's set up is basically 4 parts. We start with an introduction. There's a couple of videos and an audio, which sort of sets the tone. Actually, I take that before we even do that, we'll come right in and we'll ask a couple of questions and get answers from everybody. We'll try to get answers from everybody. Some people just won't, and then at the end of the presentation, we'll ask those same questions. And it's amazing after 3 hours, how everyone's like, oh, wait a minute, I know that answer now. And now everybody they're yelling out answers because they now feel, I think we use the word empowered a lot. And I think that's hopefully one of the things that people take out of that program is that they're empowered in the event of an emergency. They have at least some sort of training, some sort of plan to be able to deal with that, to survive that issue. And then before we talk about the breakdown, the other thing is we create civilian response to an active shooter event. But it's really not just an active shooter, but otherwise, if they didn't use shooter, it wouldn't make an acronym that people could remember. But it's really about an active assailant, because it's not necessarily everyone. I know that the country is heavily divided on firearms and gun laws, and should we have them or shouldn't we have them? But I went to a training recently, and there was an officer from London, and London has extreme gun laws. And he says we very seldom see guns. But when you look at the number of knife attacks they have compared to what we have, it's probably tenfold. So it's not just, it doesn't matter what weapon is being used. We'll have some case study that we'll talk about with vehicles were used as a weapon. So it's more about just an active assailant and how to survive that and how to adapt and plan for that type of attack. Like I said, so it's 4 parts. We start with an introduction, a couple of different videos and an audio recording. And then we talk a little bit about kind of psychology of disaster, how our bodies work, how our brains work. So that when people are faced with an emergency and things start happening, they don't feel that, oh my God, this isn't right. You know, it's normal. It's how our bodies are kind of pre-programmed things that happen in our bodies under stress. We get past that, and then we talk about the active shooters, active assailants, in different events throughout the country. Some of which you've heard of, and some of which maybe you haven't. But they're in there for different reasons, to show different types of active shooter events or active assailant type events. And then we kind of get into the meat and potatoes of it all with the ADD, avoid, deny, defend, and we really hit home each one of those and kind of talk about it, because I mean, avoid's always first. If I don't have to go against an active assailant, even as a police officer, if I didn't have to, I'm certainly not going to choose to. It becomes my job, then therefore we go towards the assailant. But anybody with any sort of common sense says, hey, if I can get away from this guy without getting actively engaged, that's what I want to do. And then if I can't get away from them, if I can barricade myself and deny them access to me, the second D is deny. If I can deny them access to me, I can stay safe until that 5 to 10 minutes, until police officers start arriving on scene. And then if I can't do either one of those, then I have to prepare possibly to defend myself. And we give some ideas, some talks, how to do that, and that it's okay, that it's legal to do that. And then it wraps up with Virginia Tech was a subject. They had an active shooter event down there.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, and I think with the Virginia Tech's part of one of the things we thought about taking out, but I think what that shows is by doing nothing versus by doing something, how the outcome improves or degrades depending on which classroom you end up in at that point. Yeah, certainly.
So with that one, are you saying there were more or less in each room, and each room did something?
Correct.
There was one classroom that has casualties, and other classrooms that had 100% casualties. So that's why we left it. I mean, again, that was something that would save time, but again, you would have lost kind of that. The point of it, yeah, and seeing that, why
sets the message. Yeah.
right, and why it's so important to do something versus nothing. And again, then we usually wrap up. When we say 3 hours, that usually includes the Q&A. So then we wrap up, and like I said, we open up to questions regarding the presentation, or like Eric had said, pretty much anything you want to ask. And then, or once kind of people break up, we'll always stick around, because there's always some stragglers that want to ask like some personal based questions and things like that. So we certainly, at 3 hours, we don't say, hey, grab my stuff and run out the door. We're there till for the duration. So
the other benefit to this type of training, and it's not a benefit to us, it's mostly a benefit to the upper management people in each individual company, is we've heard a lot of comments like they're really happy that the management brought this to our company. And that doesn't mean if, regardless, you're 1,000 employee company or 10, people really appreciate that, they care enough, the company cares enough we hear that all the time. Like you said, that's not to our benefit. So we talk about that. That's, one of the first things, Judith said, your management reached out to us, or your boss, and they wanted to bring this to you to make sure everybody's safe here and at home. So that's kind of a unintended benefit for the companies as well. And in those segments that Mike talked about, they get very specific, like even the deny part will literally teach people how to barricade that door right there. What you can use in the office space, what you can use. And again, we've been doing this in the schools for many, many years, the town school system. So
it's good to have the training right at your place of business.
It is.
You might get a in.
right, like what we've seen in the past usually is we just did one recently for a business downtown, and it was various levels of management, and then after talking to them, we're going to bring it to the board. They get approval to do all the employees. So a lot of times that's what it seems like, is the management sort of kind of kicks a little bit, scopes it out to see if it's actually something that's worth it, and then they bring us back for additional classes with all the employees. And then the big thing that we told this company specifically was to reach out to your insurance, because a lot of insurance companies now give discounts because of it. One of the places we did, like I think Eric mentioned earlier, required some sort of training. My wife, she had worked at a medical facility that they required it. But even if if it's not required, there may be a discount. And that's what the last company was like, oh, well, if we can, if that's the case, then it's easy to sell. Because we're gonna save money here if we spend money here. And they're not spending money on us, but it's time, lost productivity and things like that. That's why it's called, yeah, not money cost, but cost. So.
And if there's more than like the 50 people, do you, like, would you rather have it like in 2 sections?
Yes.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yes, I missed it at the very beginning,
So
sorry.
50 is kind of the max, but even when you start approaching 50, we've
That's too
done
many.
hundreds in a room. But the question and answer just gets ridiculous, and it's just extends the time, yeah. So like Mike said, I mean, I don't know, about 25 is actually ideal.
Yeah, I mean,
20 to 25, I mean, we can go up to more.
we know a lot of times management from company standpoint, that's kind of prohibitive, small numbers, but. And at least we just recently did it through City Hall over 2 days, and there were roughly over 100 in each class.
Yeah.
The issue, just like I said, becomes, like I said earlier, I know you must not have been in the room. If you have 25% people ask questions, you get 25 questions versus if you have 25 in the class, 25% is 5 or 6 questions. So it just speeds the end gets delayed is where the time, the additional time comes in.
2 hour and 45 minutes turns into 3.5 hours, you know. So
Oh, yeah.
that's the only.
Just us.
And we have no problem doing multiple sessions, and we pretty much have no problem doing 1 at noon a night.
And we hate to discourage questions because that's kind of if we didn't get the message across, we want to make sure that the people leave there with the answers that they need in order to get their money's worth out of the class, the bang for their buck, basically.
And
So,
depending on your business, sometimes maybe one person to bring 1 or 2 of us in for a quick walkthrough.
I was just thinking that.
Yeah,
so
so
try and do that.
we try to do that ahead of time. Because if we can do a quick walkthrough, we can make some recommendations as far as security. We talk about some of your policies, like domestic violence policies that you have in your business, that are real important, probably more so important than the active shooter policies, because that's much more likely. Not that there's any workplace relationships going on the way you work, but domestic violence is a real thing. And it's really important that you have domestic violence, but like our schools have a policy. If, like, my wife's a school principal, if I was to show up there, they would not let me in. They would stop and first call my wife and say, are you expecting your husband to be there? Because if she said no, there could be a domestic violence issue. So there's things you can do in your workplaces that we can recommend that'll make it safer, aside from all this active shooter stuff. But at least if we do the walkthrough, and what we'll do is we'll send the instructor, we have a team of instructors, like I said, Mark's our lead, but we'll send those 2 instructors that are probably going to instruct in your building. It just makes them get a feel for what you do, because everybody's a little bit different, you know, and then they can address certain things within that training that may come on.
And a lot of times, I think employers feel that they've got, this place is locked down. We went to one, they said, oh, all these doors lock, buzzer in, buzzer out. But yet the receptionist desk was probably not much higher than this, and the door behind the receptionist desk was pegged open. So I had to jump over a table to get into the locked facility, because that door was pegged open. And they're like, oh, yeah, we didn't think of that. They thought that the desk was gonna be enough to stop people. And I'm like, yeah, some people, but not most people, no. And they'll just crawl right over it and run into the back room if they need to. So like listed little things, and companies try to make things very secure, but they don't, like, so they don't think of things, they don't look at it like we do. And we look at things from a very kind of jaded, like I said earlier, jaded, kind of cynical. We kind of been to these type of environments before, so.
And the biggest thing I always try to tell people when we talk about this training is anybody can do it. Anybody. It's regardless of age, gender, it doesn't matter. Everybody can do it. It's not something that you have to be, you know, Bruce Lee or, you know, I mean, you know, or Mark, but you know, that's kind of a ninja, but you know, but you don't have to be that, you know what I mean? Everybody can do this. Everybody can, this is not something like you said, you have to, you know, we're not selling memberships to a dojo or anything like that. And, you know, just truly anybody can do it.
Hey, you've already sold us.
And again, the only thing, so there is a cost to it, actually. There's no financial cost, but if you think we did a good job, a little email to the chief is nice. If you think we didn't do a good job, then just keep it to yourself. No, but it's nice because our chief is sending us out there on our time, so it is nice for him to hear like, hey, Mark did a great job today, and you know, we really appreciate it. You know what I mean? It doesn't hurt us to be able to go out more often.
Right, and two other things we ask is, we do have like a handout, which is kind of the slideshow. If that's something you want to pass out to the employees, sometimes some companies do, some companies like, does it really help? And I'm like, no, not really. They sort of follow along. Sometimes we ask questions that are on the next page and they've already looked ahead. So they think they know all the answers type of thing. But if your companies do want that, then it's just, we'll email that to you and then you would print that out because the cost of that would be. Yeah.
So the printing,
And then at the end, we do a questionnaire survey that we don't take back that day. Because I know how we've all been in classes and you've been here for 3 hours, you're like, check, and there you go, done, because you want to run out the door. We want people to really take it to their desks, find 10 minutes a day later when they have time to go through it, because we look at all of them, we read them all, and we've made a lot of improvements off of some of the suggestions. But one of which, when we first started, our IT was kind of terrible. We'd be plugging into other people's computers and it wasn't compatible with what we had.
bringing screens.
Yeah, so once we had that, we kind of brought it to the administration and said, hey, is there any way we can get a dedicated laptop? So we still need the plug, but at least now we know all of that works. So little things like those critiques really help us improve the program.
In most places we go now have some setup, some similar to this that we can just plug and play. So the last piece to it is drills. Everybody always asks about like, all right, what do we do after? Do we do a drill? And that's entirely up to you. I mean, clearly it's recommended. But if you want to do a small drill, but my recommendation is never to do an unannounced drill. So we don't do those in our schools either. It causes undue stress and complications. It's not worth it. And the reason being is, if you're going to do a drill, you're going to tell all your employees on Monday morning, hey, Wednesday at noontime, we're doing a drill. Thursday at noontime, we're doing a drill. Police time's going to be here. It's going to be a drill. We're all going to walk through it. And we're going to go slow. We're going to walk it through it. And the reason being is, we're all adults. Nobody wants to screw it up on Wednesday or Thursday. So they're going to research what they learned in their head. They're going to play through the scenario probably 100 times between Monday and Wednesday. And the training value of that alone is far greater than that drill itself. Right? Because they're going to play like, what they come in here Wednesday and it's a mental rehearsal. What are we going to do? And we'll show what we'll do is do the drill and then we'll walk around, see if anybody has questions about how it went down. You know what I mean? Because every building's a little bit different and different evacuation points. But like you said, the program is, you're going to hear other people, other private companies say, oh, we do a run, hide, fight, it's better. It's not, it's the same thing. Even Alice, everybody had Alice training. You've had Alice training. What does Alice stand for?
Oh, God.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I
Mhm.
can't remember.
I'm a master Alice instructor, but the problem with Alice is it's a great program. It's one of the leading ones of the schools in the country. And it's a lockdown and but what's the E? Evacuate. But
Yeah,
it confuses people because evacuate is like the first thing you should know.
Right.
Like, so that's us. That's why we like ADD. It's very simple. Avoid, deny, defend.
I think I read something about them adjusting Alice training lately.
Yeah, they
that
have.
They're seeing that that's not necessarily the way the program they've been using isn't necessarily the best method.
Yeah, and again,
Evacuate.
the biggest thing with Alice is it requires intelligence. And a lot of times people don't have the intelligence because there's no shit. Like our schools have a shared app, so they haven't get intelligence, but most businesses do not.
Mm.
So how do you get information out to people is the key, because you have to make an honest decision, like, is the active shooter outside the front door and we're not letting him in? I don't want to evacuate.
Right.
But so how do you know that? So that's what we talked about in the training and the walkthroughs too. Have you tested your intercom system?
Do you have any?
Do you have an intercom system? Is everybody here? Is anybody not here? Do you have, employees with hearing impaired employees that need some type of visual? We talk about that. So there's a lot to it. So that's why I said to break it down, it's to just call it active shooter training. I think doesn't do it justice, I guess.
Yeah.
So I guess we can open it up for questions.
Yeah.
All right.
I have a question. Firstly, I'm so sorry I was late. I got lost and some traffic. Oh God, I'm so late.
Traffic in town, no.
Oh my God. Just because of the construction, so I got totally turned around, but so our building it's the Lynn building in Easton. And so the doors are all glass. That's the other thing. It's old. The windows, you don't have to have a lot of time to open them up. And we only have 12 team members. So we're also on two sides of the building and we don't have an intercom. So I guess the only protocol we would have was to get everybody to like the back room, close the door and try to escape out of that window. But there's not a lot of time to do that. And our door to the office is completely glass. So if a shooter came in or if anyone trying to disturb anybody, It would be quite easy for them to break through the glass and get in, and probably, I was gonna say, 7 seconds. So what do you do in those 7 seconds
So,
with
so the
being
first,
close to the
the
door?
first thing you would look at is, so maybe the avoid part is not good for you, right? So we always like to avoid, like, if, you know, Mr. Miyagi said, that's what nobody there.
Yeah.
Like, if you can avoid the situation, like Mark said, even us as police officers, we don't have to, we're not gonna engage in that. But, so you may want to train more toward going right to the deny, which is barricaded. Is there some, you know, office or
Right,
some closet with files are in that everybody can get into quickly and barricade that? Then you gotta look at the front office. You just, as people just opening the door and coming in, you have a buzzing system.
yeah, no buzzing system, it's just, and usually like we keep the doors locked unless we have an appointment, but there are walk-ins to the business.
Yeah, but
So-
when they come to that locked door, what happens?
Someone would have to
vetted.
go unlock it, but they could break through if they really wanted to
Yeah.
break through, is my
So-
point.
So there's other things you can do. I mean, depending on what your company wants to do, you could out, they do have bullet resistant glass. And they
Right.
also have bullet resistant glazing. That just buys you some time.
Mhm.
You can actually still shoot through it,
Mhm.
but the glass does not shatter and
Right,
compromise.
gives you more time,
Gives you more time to get to a safe space. So there's something maybe you could explore for the front of the building.
okay.
It's a film that gets applied to the
Yeah.
outside of it.
I'll ask the property owner.
That may or may not be on some, a lot of buildings in town.
Just
that-
because we are very vulnerable, honestly, and like my suggestion to the business owner was to, like, if anybody's depends who's in the building. At the time is to like move the printer in front of the door, like push whatever you can in front of the door and go to the back room and escape.
Yeah,
But
but
again, it
by the
takes
time they
time.
push that printer, they're probably just better off retreating.
Right,
So, and you could talk about that. So again, you gotta kind of see the, see what's in place, what could be recommended. Like, you know, our schools do a lot of different things and not every situation is perfect.
Yeah.
The problem with safety and security is this. You want to be, and it comes down to the schools as well. You want to be as safe and secure. I can make every school in the city completely impenetrable. But you're not gonna want your child to go to school there.
right,
So that's the happy medium, like where do you find that happy medium? And when it comes to safety and security, the number one thing is single point access. Right, so can you achieve single point access? Is all your visitors coming through a single door, are they vetted before they can come into your company? Is there somehow you can do that? Maybe you add a little post outside with a speaker where you can talk and vet somebody before they come in. And then we talk about the conversation in the training, so especially in the school training, about if there is somebody wandering around your company, they should be challenged. You know, do they have a visitor pass? Do they have a visitor pass system? And when you interact with somebody in a challenge, especially in a school setting, the second you interact with them, within the first 3 seconds, you're gonna know if they have nefarious intent.
Yeah.
Because if you walk up to somebody and say, man, can I help you today? And she just ignores me and keeps walking, like, that's a problem.
Mhm.
Or she says, oh gee, you know, I'm bringing my friend lunch or whatever, and you know. So that we talk about that too, about how do you challenge people? You know, everybody should be, like Mark used the word empowered, which we use a lot in that training. That's what it's all about, empowering people to have action as opposed to inaction.
Sure.
So this, even if you think it's the worst case scenario, but it's really not.
No,
If you have it, you can do things to make it safe.
yeah, absolutely, and we do have multiple points of access to the building as well, so that's, I think my suggestion was to keep all the doors locked at all times. Regardless if there's a meeting or not, and greet the person at the door when you expect them.
Like I said, when it comes to active shooter, you're gonna find out with the statistics that we talk about in the training. It's generally 98% of the time one person. It's usually not a coordinated attack. Most of the time it's a person with a pistol. Which slows it down too. You're not shooting rifles through windows and stuff like that. And then most of the time, it's very impromptu, if you will. There's usually not a long, drawn out, coordinated plan of how to get in there. It's like, basically, it's, you know, they have some type of mental health event, well,
Or
obviously.
they're disgruntled, but.
Disgruntled,
Yeah.
but you know, some type of mental health event, and they're gonna do some type of danger to somebody. And a lot of times it's not, you know, everybody talks about schools are only about 22% of active shooter events. Unfortunately, commerce is the bigger one, but because there's more people in commerce. And, you know, it goes all the way back to 1986. Has anybody ever heard the term going postal?
Yeah, I was just thinking. the same thing.
Yeah, so that's where that term was coined, so at a postal facility in 1986, and we talked about that. But again, there's always something you can do, and again, you know, it depends on what the company wants to do, how far they're gonna take it.
Mhm.
But even if you're the most vulnerable, it's something you can.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
I've opened it up to questions from our folks on Zoom. There's no questions currently, but we'll give it a few more minutes for people to.
I had a question too, so I was trying to think of like active shooters in time in which the Galleria, were you guys involved in that?
After the sound, yes.
That was scary.
Yeah.
That-
Again, some type of mental health event. in the gallery mall, there was two different events. One was at the crash when we went to the house and violence to a family. And then he went to the gallery and did more violence. And, you know, I guess thankfully there was a deputy sheriff off duty having dinner with his family, you know, and stop the killing basically. What was going on. So, but even in that event, like what would you do in the restaurant? You know what I mean? What do you do with your family? So we talk about that. We answer those questions in the training. You know, because it can happen everywhere. And the thing that we got to get companies to think about again is things that are not necessarily active shooter. Active shooter is the worst case scenario, but you're much more likely to have a disgruntled employee. You're much more likely to have, you know, like the firing room type of thing. You're much more likely to have an incident in the firing room, or you're much more likely to have a domestic violence situation.
That's the one that I'm most, well, not most interested, but I would be interested to understand when you give this type of training, because we had an individual who approached us at our, one of our locations, and she had a, restraining order. Thank you. Restraining order against her ex-husband, and she made it clear to us that she didn't want him coming into our store. But we didn't know what he looked like, and we were unclear on the protocol for sharing that information with the staff, right? Like that's a privacy thing. But at the same time, how do we make sure that we keep her safe and that this never happens?
Right, one of the issues with domestic violence issues or things like that are, a lot of times people are embarrassed to share it with people. So they show up to work, and I hope it doesn't show up, instead of telling somebody, be it an HR director, or be it a supervisor, or be it just the person, you know, we always call the person at the desk is the most important person in any active assailant type event, because if they control the button, they control access. Who controls access basically has the power. So by, even if it's that person that knows, if somebody knows, but a lot of times that doesn't happen because it's embarrassing to people that they can't control things in their own home, their own lives, and they don't want to share that with their coworkers. So having policies in place, it still may not guarantee that you know everything, but I think a lot of times when we talk to companies, we're like, well, yeah, I guess if we had a policy, people would feel maybe more comfortable knowing that, hey, this person's here, and you talk to them, and or even some other solutions. We talk about if you're an employer with like a receptionist desk. If Eric's coming to see me for a 10 o'clock meeting, does that receptionist know ahead of time?
Right.
And if not, it's kind of like they should have an appointment. My appointment book should be somewhere where they can access it, or at a minimum, just go up to the front and say, hey, Eric Nichols is coming in at 10 o'clock. When he gets here, can you either let him in or call me, depending on what the company's protocol is. And that alone, now if I don't tell them that and Eric shows up, they're gonna be like, well, Eric, you weren't, hold on, let me just check. And if that's your policy, that if somebody shows up unannounced, they check with that employee who they're here to see. And then now it's like, even if I didn't say, oh yeah, no, me and Eric had a big fight or whatever. Now when they call, now when they call and they say that Eric's here, I'm gonna be like, oh, don't let him in, because we had a problem.
Yeah.
So so even if they don't want to disclose, there's other ways you can sort of get around that.
Most of the bigger companies that we've done in the industrial park have implemented a recommendation that any visitors come, the person that they're seeing comes out to greet them. So the receptionist is not, making that determination. They know ahead of time that they're expected. That, so the receptionist has every day, I'm required the day before to say, all right, I have a meeting at 10, 12, whatever. These people will be here. When they show up and say, hey, I'm Eric Nichols, okay, yeah, Mark Brady's expecting him. Mark, your 10 o'clock is here. Mark has to come out to greet that person and let them in the front door.
Now, but in that situation where that person didn't want that visitor, now the receptionist is the bad guy.
Well, the other reception can just say, can you hold on for a few minutes? He'll be with you in a few minutes.
And she would
then-
exit and
Right.
he or she,
So in those situations, most of the industrial park business, the front door is locked.
okay.
So everybody's trying to achieve single point access. And they're trying to but again, some of the larger companies have security sitting there too as well, 24 hours a day. So I know that's not, feasible in most businesses. But again, some type of modification to that system. It's just that people are not coming in freely unless it's, a retail type establishment, but they're not coming into your offices freely without some type of check system, and how you modify that is entirely up to you. Well, like you said, the other thing with domestic violence we talk about all the time too is HR, I'll blame you again. You volunteer the information. And there is something going on, and HR does nothing about it.
Yeah,
So you have to have policies that, because when something blows up in a workplace, everybody usually knows, right? They say, oh, we know that was gonna happen. So, what do you do proactively to help that too? And then the other side of it is, does HR have some type of citizen program? If some of these events happen, so it doesn't have to be a full-on active shooter event. But if
well,
there's,
we've already had a couple of
Yeah.
instances at our other location.
no, but say like. There's an active shooter event, say locally, somewhere around here.
Yeah.
Maybe that Muffin or whatever. Do you address that with your employees the next day? Or say like the schools, like I said, me and my wife being a school administrator. When there's a school shooting, regardless of where it is anywhere in the country, her staff is immensely,
aware.
yeah, well, they're not only made aware, but you can see the fear the next few days. It's not really fear, but
Yeah.
the uneasiness, and then, is there somebody that addresses that, some type of mental health professional that is available? Because people do struggle, it's a real thing, and it's a difficult thing, and I didn't remember growing up with this type of events. Of course, I'm probably the oldest one. Yeah, so, but it's a reality, but again, like I said early on, the events are going up, but the fatalities and injuries are coming down dramatically. There's other training you can do with your people. Do you do stop the bleed training? Does anybody know what that is? So 98%, we learned this from our military partners in the war on terror. 98% of non-initial fatal gunshot wounds are survivable with immediate medical care, and that immediate medical care is, either a tourniquet or a quick clot. So when Mark and I became police officers, quite a few years ago, we worked patrol. We never had tourniquets with us, because back when we started, we said, well, if you put a tourniquet on, like, the person was going to lose the limb, right? But obviously the training now is different, that you can use. So we all carry tourniquets on our duty belts now. I have probably 6 or 7 on my cruiser. There's no pocket, as I said, yeah, like, you know what I mean? So there's things you can do. We brought that to the school department a few years back. We wanted to teach every school teacher in there stop the bleed, because if there's an active shooter event in a school, they can save the kid before we even get in there. Now, take it a step further, we also train now with our fire department. The fire departments are no longer sitting down the street waiting for the fire departments now have bulletproof vests. They come into the active shooter event with us and give immediate medical care to save people. So this, and we talked about that in the training. But there's a lot of things you can do, and you can imagine the superintendent of schools when I said I want to teach all the teachers how to use a tourniquet, and I said, no, not for the active shooter, in case a child impales himself in the playground. Oh, okay, so it is sometimes how you. So same thing with your employees. You don't want to just talk about active shooter, because it makes employees uneasy. You want to talk about situational awareness is the better term.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions.
Yeah, okay.
So I work at a domestic violence agency. Is it recommended all agencies like ours have an active shooter safety plan?
Yes, absolutely. But again, they're all specific to that, whether the protocol is, but I would say more so at a domestic violence center, because there is violence within domestic violence. It's much more common than there's going to be the random active shooter. So it's not probably going to be a random person at that facility. Especially if they're working, with victim advocacy or something like that. It's probably more importantly that they have some type of plan, and probably most importantly that they have a vetting process of single point access in that plan.
Great. Another question online is, how about if the person that's scheduled to come in does something unexpected?
Well, you try and plan for every contingency, and by having, like I said, they get screened at the door, they're here to see, here to see Eric. Eric's at the appointment, Eric comes out, takes them in. But you can't plan for every contingency, unfortunately. And if something kind of goes off the tracks, maybe the meeting doesn't go the way they want, and then they get irritated or aggravated or upset, and now it becomes increasing. Again, having internal policies can sort of not prevent that happening, but sort of mitigate the recall, the fallout from that.
And to add to that, one of the most important things, I don't know if we mentioned it, that people actually get out of this training, as simple as it is feeling comfortable when to call the police. So we can't tell you how many times we've been to, not an active shooter event, but all kinds of disturbances. And somebody always says, geez, I was gonna call before this I could see it ramping up, but I don't want to bother you guys. And we get that all the time. I don't want to bother you guys. It's like, well, it's okay.
That's
Well,
your job,
hey,
right?
yeah, but you'd be surprised how many people not sure, just when, like, all right, you're having a meeting in here and some person's getting a little bit violent. How long do you let that go? We say, don't let it go, because they think we're bothering us, but actually it's the flip side and the patrol side. So if a patrol officer comes here and it doesn't end up being a big deal, they don't have to write a report, so they're happy. So so people think the nonsense ones bother us, but it's actually the opposite, because they don't have to write a report. So they can just like, hey, clear, I'm going back to, having a coffee or whatever, so it's okay.
Like when you forget your alarm code password and things going on, and like ringing, and it's alert, and then the police officer shows up and we're like, this is great.
It's okay. Yeah, right, they don't have to write a report, so they're like, all right, I made it.
Right.
One thing too, to sort of kind of tie in with the, I'm in a domestic violence situation, what should we need? But a lot of businesses say, well, I sell whatever, I make something, who's ever gonna come bother us, But besides, we already talked about disgruntled employees and domestic violence, but one of the slides that it was really shocking to me was that 45% of active shooter events, the venue that was attacked had zero connection to the individual who did the attack. It was random. So 45% of those attacks are random. So like in the industrial park, one of the places that we did, they're like, yeah, we're really worried because DOR is down the street. So somebody could leave DOR very, very possibly upset, and just kind of lose it and walk to another building because they can't get back into DOR. Because they're right, but they're mad and they're lashing out, and or there's a million mental health facilities, counseling centers and halfway houses that go into neighborhoods, that again, something they get a trigger, and now they're just mad at the world, not necessarily your business, but your business happened to be the business that I walked to first. So it doesn't necessarily have to say, well, gee, I make little cute stuffed animals, who's gonna come bother us? It doesn't necessarily matter.
Right, what if that is a trigger for them?
Yeah, right, exactly.
Yeah, so.
Yeah, you know.
But it's, and then your roles are so difficult for so many reasons, obviously, but you're talking about mental health. I think those of us that have someone in our lives or, have experienced that with an employee or what have you, that has a breakdown and doesn't need that force, but needs that de-escalation and someone who's geared for that. Does your department have a mental health or several mental health professionals working with you?
We do.
Just responding to some of these calls?
We do have clinicians now.
Yeah, more than that. I think.
More than
Well, she's
that.
been full-time. We have a full-time clinician for about a year prior to that.
Cruises.
Yeah.
Goes to the mental health calls that specifically bring her out. We've actually added a comfort dog to her position recently. If they feel that little fluffy white dog, they get calm people down.
It does help.
It does help.
It's worked just. Yeah, I know. I think it's worked just.
Her name is Maggie.
It's de-escalated just in the station, just in the building.
Yeah, even in the building, like, officers that mad at each other, there comes the puppy and. But yeah, so for quite a few years, we actually tried to get mental health workers and the finances just weren't there.
Yeah.
And then after the police reform bill of 2020, we were able to get financing and funding for it. So we're actually looking to expand that program as well, but we've seen a reduction in use of force complaints. A reduction in use of force in general as a result of the clinician.
That's good.
It's deployed appropriately, deployed with the patrol division. The patrol division basically will come on scene and render it safe and then kind of take a step back. Clinician steps forward and she identifies herself. Katrina Lee is her name. And
But that's a lot for one person in a.
it
big
is,
place.
so we're trying to increase it.
Yeah,
We have other,
you can't have it 24/7.
no, we have other, she's on call for us, but we also have other on call facilities like CCBC and different things that respond and help us out when she's not available. And post 2020, our officers have gone through extensive de-escalation training. Almost too much maybe, because now sometimes it's like,
Never too much, but time
Time.
takes away from other things sometimes.
and I don't mean by that, but some of the younger officers are so in tune with de-escalation that they're almost, sometimes they don't even see the violence in front of them, you know what I mean? Because they're trying so hard to de-escalate. So, and a strong majority of our calls, we go with mental illness, so, we have policies on that. And, but yeah, it's much better system than maybe Mark and I started. As far as resources, all of our officers go through CCIT, community counseling intervention training, both juvenile and adult. Basically what it does is shows them what they can put in their toolbox, right? What resources are available to us. So instead of just, one-stop shop, all right, this person has this issue, I can refer them to these services or refer them to that.
Is that an annual training? Or
Yeah,
is it a one time?
no, the CCIT is one time, but it's reaffirmed every year and in years. the full CHCP is a week, so,
I can imagine.
yeah.
So I'm sorry, to interrupt. On the de-escalation, there was a question about the best way to de-escalate an irate individual.
I'll let you take that one.
So it's very situational. So you're talking about an irate person, armed or unarmed. If it's unarmed, which is the best case scenario. I mean, obviously, what we talk about is distance plus cover equals decision time. So let's say it happened in this room, okay? If she was the irate person and I was sitting there, maybe I casually walk over here. Because now, if she's going to attack me, it's going to take her a lot around this table, right? So that's cover, right? So we put an object in between us, if we can, a desk, anything at all. Even if it's just a chair, you're like leaning on a chair. And then you have a little bit of distance. And what that does is it gives you reaction time for your safety and or time to try to de-escalate verbally. And the best way to de-escalate somebody is not to keep talking about the same thing that's aggravating them. That's the fatal flaw. So if you're mad, like you're at, DOR and you're mad because you're paying child support, I probably shouldn't keep hopping you on child support. You're paying it, maybe talk about a little bit something else. And even if it's somewhat fictitious, talk about other programs for now. And then in conjunction to that, how do you get emergency response coming without them getting more irate? So we talk about that in the training. You can text them. So you can say, oh, I'm sorry, my Uber or my Uber Eats is at the door. Let me just text them. It's going to be a few minutes. And you're texting 911 like I need help at 170 Beach Street right now. You know what I mean? So, and again, we don't want you texting them all the time, but in an emergency situation. So there's ways to do that, but ultimately de-escalation comes down to giving yourself some type of distance cover, which gives you decision and reaction time and time to try to de-escalate without. There's one we can talk about. Years ago at City Council, I was reading a report in the record and a man took a razor blade and slit his own throat and pulled out a buck knife and wanted to attack everybody. But there's a table at City Council, probably a little bit bigger than this one, right? And he was at one end, I was at the other. I got everybody behind me. And everybody says, oh my goodness, you didn't shoot that person. I'm like, I never felt that threatened because we had a 16-foot table in between us. So, and then, obviously I think you came that night, right? Yeah, the troops came and we ultimately were able to get the weapon out of his hand and ran him to the hospital. But again, but if I didn't have that table in between us, it might have been a different situation, you know what I mean?
Right.
So that's what we talk about.
And one of the videos in the program, it's a council, it's like a board meeting,
Yeah.
school board meeting. The guy comes in and the head of the board is like arguing with the guy. That's not what I said.
So
So
I told him, gun him.
well, this was an armed one and he's arguing with him. That's the last thing. Whatever they say, this is what we need to do. Yeah, absolutely right. Agree with them, even if you don't believe in it. You need to, like I said, find some sort of common ground that, hey, you and I are on the same page, so you don't want to hurt me. And all you're doing is buying time for somebody to realize there's a problem and then somebody to get help come.
I think people have to understand, and we talk about this in internal affairs, in police department as well, in training. If you're HR or you're whoever's taking the complaints in that department, or you're the person confronted with the person that's disgruntled, whatever their issue is, you have to understand it's real to them. And regardless if it's real in the rest of the world, regardless if it's real in the company, at that moment, it's real to them. So to go against that is only going to cause more friction, right? So like Mark said, you have to agree to de-escalate the situation until you get proper resources there to help, you know what I mean?
The only other thing I would suggest too is if you know that the meeting may get contentious, have somebody else in the room, because a lot of times, and we talk about it with policing, if it's two police officers to one subject or bad guy, they're less likely than if it's one-on-one. Same thing if it's two HR directors or two supervisors to one employee. Now they're going to be like, well, I'm still going to be angry, but I'm going to be less likely to really lose it because there's two people in the room. Or if that's not possible, just say, hey, Eric, I'm going to go in to speak to so-and-so. Can you just kind of walk by and I'm going to keep the door cracked just if it gets out of hand, just either step in or kind of have somebody in the wings, or at least maybe even worse, call 911 if it gets way out of hand. But let somebody else know that especially if you've had issues in the past. We had a company recently, they had a couple employees that were going to be terminated and they actually hired a police officer for the morning, not to be in the room with them, just to be like at the front door, just to be a presence. So that wouldn't become boil over.
Yeah, we got to a place where we had to have our internal security guards waiting outside of the termination room. once we started the meeting, they were there because I had situations where people like went a little, I mean, they didn't get violent, but they were, yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
and like we
Acting
talked about at the
crazy.
beginning, like if we were to do that in this room, well, it doesn't have to be a firing, but just something that you have
Yeah, or an uncomfortable.
reason to believe is gonna be uncomfortable, then obviously you set the room up ahead of time where the employee would be sitting here and you'd be
Yes.
sitting there.
So they
And so you have an escape to avoid, right, the ADD, so,
If you do text 911, it's just to 911.
yes,
Mhm.
yeah, and again, you can call 911 order pizza. So even our officers are trained, the 911 dispatchers are trained statewide, you can call and order a pizza. And they're gonna ask you specific questions because they know you're not really ordering a pizza, you know what I mean, so there's other things you can do. That we can talk about.
The same thing with the hair salon, like if you go into a hair salon or something, you say, I want the angel cut, or you want a specific cut.
Same with bar.
They know exactly, right, or I want the angel martini, they know exactly what that means, that means code for someone's following me, someone's whatever harassing me, and then they kind of will call for help.
I'll remember that next time I go to the hair salon. The bar one, yeah. And then there's another, the other symbol, right?
Oh, yeah, there's something, yes.
So there's a symbol that they're trying to teach nationwide that, you know, that I'm being captive, basically.
Yeah.
Basically, it's thumbed over to,
Yeah, that little girl.
This.
yeah,
In the
it did work,
Midwest.
yeah. So,
Saved that way. Pretty amazing.
Well, we have 2 minutes and I want to be mindful of the time for the two of you and everyone who's joined us today. So it looks like we're out of questions on the chat. So thank you both so much. I have a feeling you're going to get some emails and calls.
that's the last thing.
Schedule. I think we have,
Yeah. So real quick scheduling, you can email myself, you want to take an email, and make it coordinate. It or something.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, so,
Can I put it, I'll put it in the chat.
yeah, so,
Okay.
you ready?
Yep.
ENICHOLS.
Yep.
At TauntonPD.com.
Okay. Sounds good.
Yeah.
So that's E Nichols.
E Nichols at Bob Brady.
And then same thing in Denver.
Same thing, yeah.
Brady.
If the rate doesn't go back.
Yeah,
TauntonPD.com.
yeah.
Okay.
So all of our officers are first initial last name at TauntonPD.com, pretty easy. And again, as far as scheduling goes, right now we're scheduled out almost through the summer, like.
Well, August, so yeah, some of the stuff anyway.
Some stuff anyway, but we're scheduled through July. There's some availability in August,
Yeah.
but not a lot.
No, then.
But then September and October, we could pick it up pretty good.
What about the safety audits? Like.
We could do walkthroughs
hand
probably
in
before
hand?
that, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, but not too far in advance, but you know, probably a week or two. Just so we kind of
We've
know.
also done them, if the training was at 10, we'd show up at 9, just take a brief
Do a
overview.
walkthrough.
Depending on people's time. You know, the last one we did, they didn't do it ahead of time, didn't realize it, but they didn't have time at the end of the meeting, so we're gonna schedule something to go back even, at least we'll do it afterwards. I mean, little things we saw there, we walked through 2
Is there a
doors.
cost?
No,
No.
there's never a cost for us to come.
As long as you're within the city limits.
Right.
So.
And again, like I said, if a company here in Taunton wanted to host a training, maybe invite, you say Bridgewater or?
Easton.
And if you wanted to invite some employees from there, we don't have a problem with that, because we're doing Taunton, you know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah, I was thinking that, you know, we have 2 retail locations, one's far from here, and I don't think that police department does anything like this.
Most of them.
So inviting them to come over to be in the training.
So we're very fortunate, I don't know if anybody's familiar with Chief Walsh, Chief of Police. He's a brilliant man, he's also, there's a thing called the ICP, the International Association of Chiefs of Police, which is the worldwide. He is the national chair for all mid-sized agencies for the entire world,
Wow.
which is mid-sized agency, any agency from 100 to 500 officers. He's kind of a bigwig in the whole world.
It's kind of
So-
a big deal.
Yeah, but what I mean by that, he's very forward thinking. He's usually on the cutting edge, and this is why he allows us to do this type of thing. This is why we have clinicians, this is why we have other things. This is why we do a ton of autism training, because he's usually on the cutting edge, because he's the one everybody's looking to see what he's doing. You know what I mean? So,
You're very progressive thinking.
very progressive.
Yeah, I think very progressively as well.
That's what we'll call it, yes. He is forward.
Yeah.
He is forward.
beginning about like the, you know, the firefighters being there, the mental health people, it's the collaboration is very necessary because as we've seen over the last several years, you know, it's all of those efforts are required to keep somebody safe or stop, you know.
100%. And like I said, he's even to the point where he allows us to really explore and do what we want to do, you know what I mean? So, and like I said, that's, when we talk about, there's never a cost when we come at any point, whether it be the drill, the walkthrough, the training, never a cost for us. Again, if you like it, then, you know, it's not bad for us to get the chief to get an email, that's all. Yeah.
Great, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, we're getting some thank yous in the chat too, so.
And thanks, Chris, for coordinating this and
Yeah.
offering this to all of us.
Yeah, happy to do it, yeah.
Yeah, she forwarded the chief an email and forwarded right to us. No, it's what a good boss does.
Good to be the boss, right? Good to be the boss.
Yeah, so, yeah, it's,
Yeah, but then you forwarded it to me, so.
That's right.
Oh, we could just meet you all.
Yeah.
I'd like to meet you on Friday.
Yeah.
Right.